It is on this day, January 4th, 2024, don't know how that happened, that I finished The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Now, there's some stories here because it has been a long time since I've posted. My bad. I apologize greatly. I started this book November, I think, like mid-November. It is a short book. It's not too long. I definitely should have finished it a while ago, but I paused in the middle of the book because I didn't know where the book was going, and the holidays were here, and then finals were here, and let me just tell you, this has been the hardest semester of school I've had in my whole life, so that's part of why I'm not paused? Wow. I've not posted a lot is because life has been kind of kicking my butt a little bit. But I have to say, I do love this book. This was recommended to me by someone I met in November, and I just was like, well, I'll try it. And it is a very interesting book. So, that's pretty much the summary. School's been kicking my butt. I just finished this book a few minutes ago, like literally, like right before I recorded. This is what the cover on my library app looks like. The Left Hand of Darkness. Very fascinating. One quick fact before we get into this. This book was written... God, I don't want to guess. I was right! In 1969. So this is an old book, and I'm a little shocked. I'm a little shocked at how old this book is when you listen to it, because there's a lot of very modern ideas in it. That's part of what I love about reading novels, like novels themselves, is they are so prevalent to modern day, even though a lot of them are very old. And even the ones that are modern, in a way, sound old. It's very fascinating how they flip-flop like that. But I would consider this a novel, just in comparison to the books I read. It's less like an entertainment book and more a like social commentary novel kind of book. I think Expanse is kind of like walking that line. This I would more so put solidly in novel territory. But we'll get more into that in non-spoilers, which will start now. So for non-spoilers, the very first thing I want to point out is the author's note. Now, when you start this book, particularly this version of the book that I read, which was like the revamp nice version, this is like the special edition, right? When you start the special edition version of this book, there's an author's note from Ursula K. Le Guin, which she read herself. I swapped between the audiobook and the physical book, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But she reads it herself, and she comments on what the point of science fiction is, in her opinion. And I love that author's note. Like, when I was first listening to this, I was driving, and I re-listened to the whole author's note 2 times, because I just love her author's note, and I can't describe it. Just, if you can find it, listen to it. You might not agree with it, but I think it is a very fascinating take on what the point of novels is and what the point of science fiction is, and what it even means. Like, what meaning does it have? Does it mean that she believes in these things? No, but also it gives you a means to think about why our society is the way it is and how else it could be. And I love that. So, her author's note gives a lot of insight into the book, and it helps guide you through the book, I think. If you don't know that author's note going in, you'll feel a bit lost for a lot of the book until you put it together. When you have the author's note telling you what she's thinking and what she's doing, then you pay more attention to the details throughout the book and like what commentary she's making, rather than figuring it out as you go. So that's my recommendation, is that the author's note at the start of the book is fantastic, and it helps with the reading of the book. It helped me quite a bit. It is hard to follow at first, which is part of why I'm saying this. It's kind of like Belgariad in that way. When I read the Belgariad, I struggled a lot with following it just because there's so many new words, there's so many new terms. There's just an insane amount of world building with words that you don't know how to spell from hearing them. It's that kind of world building. Honestly, it could probably be its own genre. I'm sure it is a genre, and I just don't know the name. But think like being tossed into the middle of Lord of the Rings without any context, where you don't know what Rivendell is. But instead of having like elves and orcs, which are things that are familiar to us, it's things that are completely unfamiliar and you don't know what they are. Whole new names for humanity, whole new like sexes of people and stuff like that that you have to learn. So that's why it's complicated to follow, is because you are in the perspective, just the premise of the book, you're in the perspective of a human that's part of humanity. Note, humanity in this case is spread between 83 planets, so there's a lot of humanity out there. But you're in the perspective of a human that got tossed onto a new alien planet that has other humans, but these humans are different. And you have to learn their language, learn their culture, learn their society, learn how they function, how they're biologically different but still human. And because you're in the perspective of this alien that's trying to learn and figure all this out and not know or understand these people, it's hard to understand the story at first. But over time, you see the main character start to adapt to the society and understand it and realize its errors and realize all these different things about the society and how it reflects on the humanity he knows, which is spread across many planets. Very fascinating. It's pretty much the premise of the book. So, hard to follow at first, but also there's a lot of interesting details along the way that really cling. And I think, again, that's part of why the author's note is very interesting, is when you know about that at first, the very first thing that caught me on the book was discussion about different sexes, which, fascinating, I love it. It's not even like necessarily like a queer book, but also it is. It's not and it is. Anything that challenges gender norms and just challenges thinking about sex is inherently queer. It's also inherently, I guess you could say, feminist. It inherently makes you analyze how women and men are treated in our society and what their differences are and stuff like that. And it's a recurring theme in the book. So I think it's very fascinating. So pretty much what all that means is that this book is pretty heavy on like social structure. It's also heavy on politics. So if you don't find politics interesting, that is a lot of the first half of the book. Second half of the book, not as much. But first half of the book is a lot of like politics and like social structure and like world building on the social structure so you can understand what's happening. And then there's a turn later on in the book, which I did not expect, that really caught me and hooked me for the rest of it. And I finished all of the rest tonight. So really good, short audiobook. But the reason why I switched between the audiobook and the physical book is because there's so many words that I don't know how to spell. So I kept listening to the audiobook and then loading up the physical book, loading up an ebook, I guess, to look at the spelling and understand what they're saying. Because sometimes there's a lot of those words you don't know in a row, and you're just like, I don't know what they just said. And then you look at it, and it makes more sense. So there's a lot of like manipulation of language in this book, because everyone's speaking different languages. There's several languages on this planet, and then there's the language off the planet as well, so there's a lot of complexity with language. But it's very interesting, and I like what it does for the story. I think I had one more non-spoiler note. Said that. Oh yeah, there's commentary on religion as well. I think I keep like running into a bunch of books with religious commentary, and what's very interesting each time is that I don't want to like delve into this because I don't want to like tell you my life's history, but I'm so unknowledgeable in religion that in a way I'm a blank slate for it. So every time I read of religion in books, it's like I'm learning something completely new that I've never heard of before. It's very strange, probably not typical, but I think that's what's interesting about things like this, where they're like completely unique religions that have ties to our religion, which is another fascinating thing about this book, ties to our belief, but are also like completely separate. And it's a huge thing in this world that these aliens, everybody's alien in the story, but that these specific section of humanity is on, they have a lot of different religions and very, very like specific origins and like how their culture originated from these religions and stuff like that. So again, very fascinating social commentary kind of book. I kind of want to re-listen to it, I'll be honest. I already want to re-listen to it because it's very interesting. There's certain scenes that I really want to rewatch, which goes into spoilers because I want to talk about some specific quotes. To be fair, I didn't write down the quotes as they happened, so some of these are paraphrased. But I want to get into some specific quotes that I love from this book. But before we get into specific quotes, I want to just talk about certain characters. So, spoilers section starting now. I do not have tea to drink because I just finished it right before the video. Rip. With all that said, we'll get into spoilers. So, first of all, I love the whole character development arc of Estraven. At first, I just thought Estraven was just going to be a side character. I totally thought that he somehow was a traitor and was confused by it, just as the main character, Gimli, was confused by it. And it turns out later on that he was actually trying to help him and save him the whole time, but there was miscommunication in language and understanding, and you can tell each time they were talking that they couldn't understand each other. So the whole, like, at first you're so confused about like what these characters are doing, and you think he's a bad guy, and then he returns in his perspective, going to another country. Why did I just forget how to say it? It starts with an O. It starts with an O. I just had all of it in my head and it all just left. But when he gets to that country and he has to like make his way in and find a way to become a unit and stuff like that, you're like, what is he doing? Like, why is he now a part of this? And then you see that he makes it so Gimli goes to that country, and then you're like, oh, I see what's happening here. And then there's the turn in the book where they both get, well, I mean, Gimli gets sent to jail, Estraven takes him out of jail, and then they have to travel across the ice. And I think that's kind of, now that I just binge read the rest of the book, I feel like that's kind of the main thing in the story, is the journey on the ice. I'm not saying that anything not on the ice isn't significant, but all the side stories and a lot of the religious stories all have to do with the ice. Note that this is a planet that is covered in ice. It is cold all the time. It is pretty much freezing. Freezing temperature is hot for these people. So there's a lot of ice, but this is specifically like hiking across like the frozen oceans and the glaciers. There's a lot of like odes to it throughout the whole story, and then when they have their travel across the ice, that's when they start talking to each other, they clarify things, and then there's a fantastic development on their relationship as two characters. And it is really interesting the whole time. I was like, are they going to go towards friendship? Are they going to be lovers? What is going to happen here? And in the end, it's pretty evident that they're lovers. Like that, they used the word lovers. Specifically, Gimli used the word lovers to describe them. But also, because they were alien and they were both finding solace in being alien in that moment because they were isolated, they decided not to do anything about it. So they were like, friendship. It was one of those things where they're messing with the human idea of what love is and what defines a relationship and what defines friendship. And that's always a theme that I love in stories because those things can definitely intertwine, for sure. So that whole, everything about that whole sequence, I love it a lot. And I really want to reread it. So, very exciting. And pretty much, like, the switch to when Gimli went to jail was, like, that's what triggered my, like, rush to the end. Was like, oh, I was not seeing this coming. And it should have been evident, because Estraven came in and said, you need to do this now. And then in the next chapter, Esteban said, like, it's too late, I didn't save him. And you're just like, wait, what happened? And then you hear Genli being arrested. And you're just like, oh, he's going to jail. Oops. By the way, if you're not following who Genli is, but you've read the book before, Mr. I. Most of the book, he's called Mr. I. Towards the end, I really got the name Genli stuck in my head, so now I think of him as Genli. But it's not even pronounced that way. It's pronounced Genri by all the locals because they can't pronounce the letter R. Or L. They pronounce the letter L as R. So, anyway. That's pretty much what triggered my rush to the end, was because I just loved that whole story, and then Esteban coming in and saving him, and then the things they talked about while they're on the ice, and some of the things that happened on the ice. It's just crazy. A lot of commentary on like different like body structures, a lot of commentary on, again, the sexes, and what is war, what is the point of sending someone as an emissary, and all kinds of commentary. I also love the journal entry format. I think that mostly comes into play with the jail onward. The jail sequence, it's kind of like Genli like reflecting on when he was in jail, and like only the few things he remembers from that time period. And then after that, it gets into Esteban's journal, which he kept throughout the journey on the ice. And sometimes it's Genli reflecting on the journal and talking about the journal, and then other times it is actually Esteban's journal entries. And you can tell the journal entries stop when he dies, and then it kind of becomes like Genli's like journal / record of what happened afterward. So I think that's very interesting. I really liked that formatting. It's part of what like really pulled me along in that section, because a lot of it was kind of first person, sort of. It's kind of like reflection first person of Genli, like, I'm here, I talked to Esteban doing this thing, we were both confused, and talking about things he did, and then it like kind of has that conversion to like, this is the story we're telling kind of thing. And storytelling is also a very important theme in this story, because Esteban's like country and religion and where he's from is like an oral language based, an oral storytelling based culture. So storytelling is also very important for Esteban's culture. Again, there's a lot of cultures on this planet, but that one in particular is significant for him. Pretty much said this already, but like this really gives me the vibe of a novel from the very beginning, because there's a lot of stuff you don't understand at first, which is typical of fantasy and sci-fi, makes sense. But there's like side scenes to pull you along, and these side scenes are usually like things to make you reflect on different things or notice the differences between different people or different cultures or stuff like that. And again, it really pulled me along. It's very interesting. It's very heavy on those kinds of things. Though I can tell you, I've listened to the first chapter 3 times. I can tell you that I still don't understand some parts of the first chapter. But towards the end, you start to see some stuff loop around, which pulls it all together and makes a lot of sense. I almost thought that a certain thing would loop around. It did not, but I thought about it. She made me second guess myself when I was reading the ending. But there were some like very interesting loops coming together towards the end of the novel that explain some of the earlier stuff. And then the last thing is quotes. So these are kind of like most of these are themes. Some of them are like things I just liked to hear. The first thing was a theme on like purgatory, which is very much part of the planet. I'm not saying that Genli society, God, all the words are leaving me. The Ecumen? Genli society, the Ecumen. I'm not saying that they didn't have being a pervert defined, because it definitely was a thing, and they're a lot more shy on like revealing your body. Just like pretty much Genli's culture is a lot of Earth's current culture with a little bit added on, because sci-fi. But it's a lot of our current culture. Actually, I would even say it's a lot of the culture from the 60s, because it's at this point in this novel, Genli describes it as there's not a lot of female people in STEM. There's not a lot of female people in science and stuff like that. So I would say it's even like a little further back than we are nowadays, but like it is mostly our culture. This planet has like a completely different set of like what purgatory is, because there's certain things that are allowed, like incest is present on this planet, which is something that we very much frown on in the society I live in. I can't comment on all societies on the planet Earth, but society I live in definitely frowns on that. So there's that distinction, but there's also like other distinctions where because of the way that their biology works, they pretty much don't care about orgies, which our society kind of cares about, I would say. Don't care about like public presences, don't care about like exposing yourself, like all those kinds of things. Their society doesn't have defined like ours does, because again, the whole social structure is different. And it's very interesting throughout the whole novel, they start to call the character that we follow, Genli, they start to call him a pervert because he's constantly like high on hormones according to their science. And it's like scary to them because they're not used to like seeing someone who's like constantly, it's kind of like the best equivalency I can give is like seeing something constantly in heat. It's very concerning and confusing if you saw a creature that was in heat 24/7. That's kind of how they look at Genli throughout the story. So they start to call him a pervert more and more throughout the novel, and towards the end, like that's kind of like his defined personality, like according to the people. But you can tell that he kind of doesn't care. He's just kind of accepted that state of being on that planet. It's very weird. Anyway, moving on from that one, the yin yang. The whole novel is all about like having two sides of something. It's like tossed in throughout, and you don't notice it. It's like sprinkled throughout. You don't notice it at first, but then you start to see a lot of the themes between light and dark, and then you start to hear the left hand of darkness, the right, or light is the left hand of darkness, and darkness is the right hand of light. You start to hear those kinds of analogies throughout the story, and at one point, Genli draws the yin-yang symbol and explains how humanity has a symbol that's also talking about light and darkness in the way that Esteron's society views light and darkness. Not exactly, but there's always a dichotomy, and they were talking about the existence of dichotomies in their cultures. So that was very interesting. There's a quote, this is a paraphrase because I can't remember the exact word that Esteban used, but there's a quote where it's like, to be vulgar, or to frown on vulgarness is to be vulgar. Or it's like, to frown on being inappropriate is to be inappropriate. Talking about the irony in how having opinions on things is having an opinion on things. It's all like stacked and layered in itself. And similarly, he talked about how you're always on a certain path, because in order to get on another path, you have to author a new path. And if there's no new path, then you're always going to be on that path. And stuff like that. He put a lot of complexity into words. He's very philosophical in a very interesting way throughout the novel. And I liked that philosophy. That was pretty much right before he went to save Genli from jail. Next, a lot of commentary on war, because Genli's society knows what war is, but Esteban's society, it's not Esteban's society because Esteban's part of one country and there's many countries, but the planet that Esteban is from, that whole planet has never had war, ever. There isn't a word for war in their language. And that's a very interesting thing, because I think the first half of the novel, I kept wondering if they were going to go to war because of Genli's presence. And I wasn't sure for a decent part of the novel. And you don't ever know. They end the story with a trade truce offer. they don't tell you necessarily that that truce truly went through. They tell you that they started like doing like trade and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be war. And it doesn't necessarily say if the other countries are as happy about the situation as Cardhide is, which is the country that ended up starting the treaty. So very interesting reflections on that. And it is, I kind of like the idea of it being open-ended, of you don't know how significant that is. The meaning of love, we already talked a little bit about this, but Genli starts to reflect on the meaning of love, and he starts to reflect on the meaning of like his connection, patriotism, first of all, love of your country. There isn't a lot of patriotism on the planet, and so he thinks a lot about the patriotism he has for his humanity, and then like his understanding of the humanity he's from, and then he reflects on like the meaning of love and how it can transcend different species or different kinds of humans. And towards the end, he says that when he finally meets a human of his species of humanity, this is so complicated to talk about. When he finally meets a woman who's a cis woman of our current society, he talks about how it's like weird to see her, like she looks wrong, and then like the men behind her also look weird and look wrong to him, and it's so weird hearing their voice isn't right, because he's so used to the society of the planet he's on now. And he talks about how when he sees his physician again, which is from the planet, when he sees his physician again, it looks like a familiar face. It looks like a face that is more right to see to him. And it's very interesting because it's kind of like he's accepted that as his new vision of humanity. He's seen the Cardhidish people and all the other people now as human, which at first he distinguishes them as alien. So you see he has a character arc of at first like distinguishing them as very different, and towards the end still seeing them as different because he's still looking for femininity and masculinity in everybody rather than just not acknowledging either. But despite that, he has fully accepted them into what it is to be human, and also found love in that kind of people, though he died, rest in peace Estroven. But he started to recognize how his feelings and recognition can transcend different biologies and different species. So I love that. That's pretty much the summary of everything I love about this book. But that was towards the very end. I was like, towards the very, very end, he was like, his physician looked familiar, and I was like, oh, this is a very interesting theme. I am very here for it. So, probably could have said some of this better, because it is 1 a.m. My bad. But pretty much that's how I feel about the novel. I guess like this is kind of like back to non-spoilers, like in summary, but I love this book. It's really good. This is also the first book I've finished in a while. I actually have started and not completed several books in the last few months. One of them was only 6 hours long, and I really would have finished it, but my library loan expired, and it would have been 5 months before I got it back. So that's why I never finished it. But I definitely want to go back and finish some of those books, and in particular, I want to finish this book, which I'm probably going to start tomorrow if I'm not busy, but it might be the day after that, because I probably will be busy tomorrow. But I want to get back to this book. I don't know. I think I'm going to go back like 3 chapters. That's my plan. I've been like mentally running through the stuff I remember last happened. I remember most of Shallan's storyline. I just need to remember where Kaladin is currently and what's going on with that's a different book. What's his name? Dalinar. figure out what's going on with Dalinar. So that's where I'm currently at here. I think I'm at the horse riding. I might be past that. I remember horse riding, so I'll see if I can find the scenes I remember and continue from there. So I guess we're now in what's new and what's next. I'm going to be reading this book. What else am I going to be reading? I think I'm mostly going to be focusing on this book. My friend has finished their 3rd draft of their novel, so I'm also going to be reading that. I can't obviously leave a review on it, but that will take me some time because it is the length of a novel. So I'll be reading that on the side. And I read some short stories from this book. Let me pull down all the new books because there's a lot of new books to show that I bought either for the holidays or beforehand. Ooh, I haven't shown this one yet. Ooh, that's gonna fall. Hold on, 1 second. Okay, there we go. I'm so excited to show that book. I think these are all the new books. I did leave a few books at my house as well. I gotta remember. I bought Getting the Ninth in physical copy because I own it as an audiobook currently. There's one other book I bought, and I don't know what it was, so we'll have to think about it. But, got some new books here. I bought The 5th Season by N.K. Is it Jemisin? This was highly recommended to me by 3 separate people and my professor. And that was a very interesting conversation that I had with my professor. Like, he was very adamant that I should read this book. So, I do very much want to read it, so I bought it. I bought a romance book. This is wild. If you've been on this channel, you know that I try to avoid romance. But what was really funny is I saw this book in the sci-fi section one day, and I looked at the cover, and I said, that looks gay, and I Googled it, and it is. And I read the premise. I don't know how I feel about it, right? I didn't know how I felt about it for quite a while, because I looked at the premise, and I was like, it sounds like it could work, and it sounds like it could not work. I don't know how I feel about it. But now I've met 2 people who have read it, and both of them want me to read it, so I got it. And I'll be honest, at this point, I'm just curious. There's a point where books like this will haunt me, and like every time I'm at a bookstore, I'll think about it. And so when I got like $50 to spend at Barnes & Noble, I got this one because I was like, it's just going to keep haunting me if I keep thinking about it. I will say I'm a little picky. The word winter curves over the top. Just a little picky, but Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. And there is a sequel book, so I guess it's a series. It's probably going to be more than a trilogy. This is the book that I read some short stories from. I can't review it because I've not read all the short stories, but this is just about being transgender. It's written by a bunch of trans and non-binary authors. You can see the list of authors here. And I actually told my professor about this for my career literature class, and we ended up reading some of the stories for my class. So that was very interesting. I kind of want to talk about some of the readings I did for class, but the only book we read entirely in class, I didn't read every chapter because I was stressed about other classes. And I don't feel I can rightfully review it because I skipped so many important chapters. It's a book that I do need to read fully one day, but it's also kind of it's a depressing book. It has a lot of sexual violence in the first half of the book, and that's part of why I skipped it because I was stressed about other classes. So I think it's a book that I want to read one day. And it gives a lot of like fascinating like history and reflection on the queer experience. However, I'm not gonna read it yet. Lastly, it's so beautiful. This is the last of the Sanderson Kickstarter books I bought. Very, very pretty, of course, like all of them are. I filmed the unboxing of all but one of these books, and I don't know if I'll post them, but I have all the unboxing videos, so I can. Look at even like the little chapter designs are so nice. Look at this. Hold on. The chapter design. I love it. It's just so beautiful. The red and black is a staple, I have to say. I actually have my copy of Dracula right here. If I can not knock over all my books grabbing it. I have my copy of Dracula, which has the same thing. It's red with the black. And I'm a big fan. I like it. What's weird about this copy of Dracula is that it's foam. The cover is made of foam. It bends. It's very weird. But anyway, I'm also going to be rereading Dracula at some point. I haven't decided when, but I brought it back because I really wanted to reread it. Because I learned things about the author, Bram Stoker, that I did not know before. And now I'm very intrigued at how different the book will read now. I last read this when I was like 14. Just a while ago. So that's why I want to reread it, because I feel like I have a lot more nuance in my reading now. But yeah, these are all the new books I got, and still planning to read Words of Radiance. Mostly next. I might try out some of the books that I started and didn't finish. And more Ursula K. Le Guin books. I'm very interested in reading more of those. There's another author that the same person recommended me, and the name's not coming to me. But I'm trying to get into more female authors, because I don't have many. And so this book was a step in that direction. So anyway, with all that said, I don't know when I'll be back. This next semester is very much going to be worse than last semester. And last semester, I can't express to you how bad last semester was. I stopped every hobby I have. I didn't do a single hobby all of last semester. I had a better social life than I've ever had, but also I didn't play a single video game except for in October. So, struggling a bit right now. We're trying to balance life between work and school. So, I have 12 more days until the class starts, so I'm going to plan to read this in the next 12 days. Alright, with all that said, that's not a promise, by the way. I'll see you all next time. Happy New Year, and may 2024 be more successful. Bye-bye.